Ashes of Creation is making open world PvE great again. It's bringing that old school vibe, and I'm here for it. Let's jump in, let's talk about it. So we just had today's live stream, which was about the Citadel of Steel Bloom and Firebrand the Dragon. May have messed up those names, don't judge me. They did early on quickly talk about how they listened to some of the feedback on the alpha keys. They've addressed that, and it sounds like, you know, they want to put it behind them. And so does the community, I think, at this point. But today's live stream was basically an open world dungeon kind of thing, which then led on to spawn a world boss. And that world boss was Firebrand the Dragoon. So I'm not a lore guy, I'll leave that to the lore people. But basically, the Citadel is being temporarily taken over by these new creatures, new enemies, because of an event. And this was due to an ongoing story arc. And Stephen and his fellow adventurers join to try and find the Orb of Ultimate Essence, which, if I'm honest, is a really dumb name, but it is what it is. And yeah, they just simply work through the dungeon, the open world, the Citadel of Steel Bloom, killing the mobs as they go. Classic tank and spank. It doesn't look like a lot of the open world enemies that are just elites have anything to them necessarily that are super special, but that's obviously very different when you get to the world boss. They go through this though, and then they trigger another event, which is basically a protect the flag kind of thing, and you protect it for a period of time, killing all the enemies, and that finishes the event. This in itself is sort of quite cool and quite old school. Future J here. I'm going to refer to spell effects as animations a couple of times, and I don't want to re-record everything. Be aware that when I say animations, I mean spell effects. There were people in my chat who didn't necessarily really like the combat, but for me the combat just looked like old school MMOs, and for some of you that might be a good thing, for some of you that might be a bad thing. The one thing that I would say is that the animations are consistently too strong. And this means in close quarters, you can't really see what's going on. Now, the entire area that they're in has this sort of like God ray effect, and it sort of makes it all a little bit misty, which in my opinion sort of washed out some of the graphics, but I'm not really too like hung up on that, but I just wanted to note it. But the animations, they look awkward in sort of small scale combat, especially when you're inside. Now, eventually the lighting will get fixed and maybe it won't be as bad, but I still think seeing a bard with like actual dancing lights jumping around and stuff, for me it's all a bit too much. I think they sort of need to rework some of the animations just to make them a little bit more clean and clear and simple, and probably more performant, to be honest. When they actually get to the open world boss, the animations become less of an issue because everybody's sort of spread out. Anyway, the event that they trigger is because they steal this egg. Well, what kind of egg is it? It's a dragon egg, the Firebrand. Now, they do the open world dungeon with just 8 of them. It's a party of 8 because in theory you're supposed to actually have one of each class. Of course, it's the alpha, so there's only actually 6 classes, so they don't have one of each, but they still have 8 of them to go through the dungeon, which looked sort of like pretty difficult in a way. It didn't look like it would be super easy or hard, but obviously judging difficulty in an alpha that I've not played, well, next to impossible. But the dragon swoops in from the skies and they need more than 8 of them. So they go and very fortunately have the entire raid just waiting on a hill nearby. What's interesting, the Phoenix Initiative people who are participating in this have had their NDA lifted. I don't think I know anybody who was involved, but you know, there will be some interviews in the next coming days, I'm sure. Anyway, they all group together to take on the dragon. The area that they fight in apparently is a work in progress, so it's worth noting that, you know, it might be a little bit barren, but maybe there's things to be added on here. And they did say, actually, this is only one way of spawning this dragon world boss. There will actually be different ways, but obviously we're not sure what they are, especially in the alpha. Apparently there will be different dragon types and ages. Obviously, the older they are, in theory, the stronger they will be in dragon lore, I guess. Now, for the actual mechanics with the dragon, I think most of the people were sort of semi-happy with it. The mechanics were quite varied. There were stomp ring effects, there were fire circles, there was times where the dragon would sort of take a step back and do a dragon breath in a sort of arcing motion, which apparently will target clumps, by the way, with the breath weapon. There was a time where it sort of flies up into the sky and does 2 swoops, breathing fire each time. All of it, in my opinion, looked pretty nice. As tab target combat goes in the open world, I think that looked great. As the fight got on, apparently it sort of created like a soft enrage mechanic, but the team managed to deal with it first time. Now that then meant some people were questioning the difficulty of the fight. Well, there's a couple of things to note with the difficulty. 1, Stephen was playing this with God mode, so he could record it properly. 2, This then meant he could battle res very easily. And 3, they probably just knew the mechanics before they even did it, so it's not like watching somebody do it the first time. Now, with the battle res thing, they spoke about how it does sort of sound like battle res would be unlimited, but it will be something quite committing if you are to do it. For example, it will take a long time, cost a lot of mana, and then the person that you res is going to have a little bit of health, and they could easily just die again. So you need to think about when you're doing it, but it sort of sounded like it would be unlimited, which a lot of people might be against. Now, it's worth noting that if there were more people than, say, 40, let's say you brought 300 people to this open world boss, well, the health of the boss doesn't actually scale, but the behaviors and the actions will change, probably meaning more mechanics, and more mechanics that will target larger groups. So for example, the breath weapon, which is targeting a group, if you had maybe 2 times the amount of people, there would be 2 times the amount of groups, and you would just get, flamed to death. I also believe that actually the loot will be sort of finite. So if you do bring a lot of people, then all of the loot isn't going to be able to go to who you want it to go to. But then conversely, if it means you don't get PvP ganked while you're killing the boss, it's probably going to be worth it, because it's better that you get it than another guild gets it. So I still think this could be very zergy. We'll have to wait and see. It's very possible in a way that another group could come along and try to troll this in a couple of different ways. Maybe you just have one person finishing people who are like sort of nearly dead. Obviously in that case you just try and kill them back. Maybe you have an entire group who just come along. They don't really want to fight you because they don't want the corruption, but maybe they'll just tag the boss. That'll make the fight a little bit harder. Maybe they'll have a couple of them fighting and killing the lobbies. Maybe there'll be some trolling potential, but maybe it will also cause just open world PvP as well. As for who gets the loot, by the way, it's basically whoever does the most damage. If you are the one who gets the initial tag though, you get sort of like an extra 10% damage added to your total. Now what's interesting about that is Stephen kept mentioning 50% as the number, but obviously, technically, you could actually get to 110% there. If there were 2 groups and you both did 50% and then you got an extra 10% for tagging, you'd be 110% in total, which obviously doesn't make any sense. I assume if there's multiple groups as well, then it won't be 50% being the magical number. It'll just be whoever has the highest percentage. He didn't actually say that, but I'm going to assume that for it. For the loot that you will get from the boss, a lot of the times it will be a combination of like full items that you can obviously just straight up equip, or there will indeed be items and recipes and that kind of thing. Overall, for me, it definitely looked like it was old school open world content. Content with big groups where you're going to have to pay attention to other big groups, and it's going to get very, very spicy. Somebody in my chat was like, what's to stop another guild just coming along and finding you and killing you? Well, nothing really, apart from the fact that the map is going to be very, very big. So if you're in a guild from a different node that's miles and miles away, which obviously might not be applicable in alpha, but maybe in the full game, then they're not going to have time to get there and try and stop you. Nor will it really necessarily be worth their time, because they can just go and do their own world boss. So I'm not too stressed about that. It is alpha. I'm not too stressed about that. I'm not stressed about any of the issues because they can still fix them. Even the animations could still be toned down. And for the difficulty of the fight, until I play it, I won't know. I don't know what gear they're equipped. I don't know anything about that. I don't know how many times they've done the boss. I don't know how much Steven's God mode really mattered because he wasn't really healing that much, but he was battle resin. So let's just wait and see when it comes to difficulty. I'm also going to go on record here and say, I don't think every fight needs to be super duper hard. Classic WoW is pretty damn popular, and a lot of it's not that hard these days, especially when you're covered in a billion different world buffs. Yes, there should be some challenging content, but not all the content needs to be super challenging. That's my thoughts on that anyway. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Big shout out to my Patreons. I really appreciate you guys. A big shout out to my Twitch subs and anybody who comes over and watches me over on Twitch. I probably won't be streaming tomorrow because normally with Saturday I spend it with my wife and kid. But, Sunday I'll be back if you want to talk about Ashes of Creation. I'm right there. I'm right there. Other than that, have a most beautiful, beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.